Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let's continue implementing the projects by defining the next feature, which is product feature. Before implementing this particular feature, I would like to clarify some stuff. Under Xcode, it's a little bit different and it has some limitations when it comes to defining nested modules, if you will. In other words, nested packages. Basically, I have tried three combinations. For the first one, a feature represented by a folder, and within a folder, I have created for example, data layer as package, core app and core UI. But the caveat here is basically you have to provide a unique name for each module. In other words, you have to name it, for example, product, feature, data, and you can add this as you normally would. Now, the second solution I have tried is for each feature, or we're going to represent the feature by a project, basically. Under Pocket Goods, we're going to do something like new project, and you're going to create static library, and it's gonna be just a normal project. This idea is not good at all because it follows the same caveat of the first one. You have to provide a unique name for each layer. For example, you have to do product feature presentation and product feature data and so on. In my opinion, this is not intuitive. It's not like Android Studio. If you do remember under Android Studio, you can create a module within a module, which is very intuitive, but here I could not do this. We have to create packages or layers in a certain way, like Android Studio. If the solution is to provide unique name for each layer, nah, I'm not gonna do it, I'm sorry. I'm going to opt in the last option, which is create a new. First of all, you have to click on Pocket Goods, parent folder, new, and project, package, library, and choose the location of your library. It's gonna be product feature. Add it to Pocket Goods and create the minimum version of the iOS, the dependencies, core app and core UI, and add those dependencies to the target and save the file. And the product feature, I'm going to delete this file. And for each layer, unfortunately, we have to represent each layer by a folder. And again, this is what I come up with. At the end of the day, Pocket Goods application is modular and it follows clean architecture, which is the most important thing here. Now, under product feature, I'm gonna add a new folder, domain, another one for data, another one for presentation. All right, let's start with the domain layer, the repository, and another one for the use case. Let's create a new file. It's gonna be for the protocol products repository. For the first function, we have to get the products. That should return any publisher of type resource, pagination response, products preview, and here never. The second function gets product. It should return any publisher of type resource and product. The other function to get the suggestions, and the last function to search the products. As usual, we need to define the use cases. And for that matter, I have just prepared a template file for this. New file from template, and I have the use case, get product, and the repository type related to this use case is basically the product repository. Hit next. Now, in order to define a use case in Swift, it's very easy. Basically, what you have to do, you have to override the function call as function. As simple as this. Here we have to provide the ID of type integer 64. It should give us any publisher of type resource, of type product, which is nullable, never. It is a little bit different because we have the repository as a nullable value. If the repository is null, emitting a single value to the publisher of type resource, of type product, and it's null, I'm going to emit an error, null, ns error, domain, let's do, for example, repository not found. And we have to erase to any publisher. Now, if we have the value, await repository and get product. Let's implement the second use case, the page. This is an async function, any publisher, resource, products preview, and never. It will return, await, and the repository gets products, provide here the page. As simple as this. For the get suggested products, it is an async function that has to return any publisher of type resource, list of products preview. With the same manner, I'm gonna copy this, and repository gets suggested products, pass in the query as an argument. The last one, which is search products use case, because it's the same thing. Instead of get products, it should be search products, passing the query as an argument as well as the page. and we are done basically defining the use cases. We're going to group all the use cases in one structure. Let's call it product use cases. Now let's implement the domain layer, which is basically a public final class that should implement the products repository protocol. As dependencies, we need the API service and the database manager. We have to create a public initializer for this to inject those dependencies in the constructor. We have to make the API call, serve to the user the old cache, and after refreshing the cache, we're going to serve to the user the new cache. Basically the single source of truth principle. Implement the first function, which is getProducts. If you do remember, in the implementation of getProducts under Kotlin, we have used flow to simulate a stream of data, basically from three states. The first state, loading state, and success state or error if we have an error. We're going to do the same thing here by using the publishers. Once and for all, we're not going to cache anything here, so there is no need for the database manager. But we have to use the API service. An API service is nullable. Therefore, we're going to check if this service is null. We're going to emit a value to the publisher by doing just of type loading. Going to send an empty pagination or empty data. We have to erase to any publisher. The first emission that we have to emit is a resource of type loading equal just of type loading empty. The same thing as we have done earlier. No data to be served, but basically we are just under the loading state. Now we can make the API call. We have to surround this block with do catch. I'm gonna store the response of the API call under response and try await API service. And we have to make the raw get. For the endpoint, we have the product page and we have to provide the query page, and the return type is basically the pagination response DTO of type product, preview, and self. We need to convert the response from DTO to the model, pagination response model, product, preview, and self. And for the mapping function that should be passed as an argument, we can access here the first parameter by doing $ and 0 to product preview. Next, we're going to initialize the value to be emitted for the publisher. I'm gonna call it success equal just or resource pagination response products preview. In this case, we're going to send the success state. And the data, it is data that we have obtained from making the API call. I'm going to return here publishers. We're going to merge the two values, the loading state and the success state under one stream. I'm going to erase to any publisher. Now, if we have an error, we need to merge another value, which is basically the error instead of success. I'm gonna store it under error. And for the data, it is pagination response and empty. And for the error, from the exception under catch block error. And finally, we're going to return publishers. And we have to merge the two values or the two emissions, the loading state as well as the error state. And we have to call erase to any publishers at the end. Now for the get products, we need to handle caching here. Serve a single source of truth to the user, which is the database. We're going to serve some data or old cache. We're going to refresh the cache by using the API call and serving to the user again the new cache from the database. API service and let database, else we have to emit just and data equal null. We have to erase to any publisher. Now I'm going to store a variable here or declare a variable for the loading state because it's gonna vary. So basically it is of type just and resource of type product, which is null products. We're going to handle the API call. Therefore, let's surround this block with try catch. Now, first things first, I would like to get from the database the old cache. I'm gonna store it under this value product with images. We can access this value by doing try and await and reader. Get the product entity, including product entity and image. And we're going to filter by the ID as request. The relationship type is of a product with images and self, only one record, using the database. We are maintaining the same principle of the Kotlin version of Pocket Goods. In this case, the loading state, it is just of type resource loading state, and the data basically is product with images, and we can access the products and do to products. We have already defined this mapper, which is good. In case we are under the an error state, just loading. The data here is null. Let's store the response of the API call under response, try await, API service, get. First of all, I have to insert the data to the database. Basically, we need to insert the product entity by doing try database, insert response to product entity. On conflict strategy, we have to do replace. We need to insert the product entity, then the media. Now we're going to insert the related media. Let's prepare the success state to be emitted to the publisher, and for the data, it's a response to product. Finally, we're going to return publishers, gonna merge as usual the load-in state with success state and erase to any publisher. In case we have an error, we're going to do the same thing, publishers, and merge the error states as well as the load-in states as we have done in the previous function. Now for the other function, get suggested products, first of all, we're going to check if the API service is null. I'm going to erase to the publisher a loading state of type loading and to pass as data an empty array. Let's surround this block with try catch. In case of an error, we're going to erase to the publisher a resource of type error and pass in the error from the catch block. First of all, this is a post method. Therefore, we're going to assign here a form data. Try, first of all, JSON serialization data, pretty much the array representing the fields. Try to do the right one, which is basically search query, and its value is the query from the parameter. And for the options, there is nothing here to be done. Now we have the form data ready. We can make the API call by doing API service and post. This is the API endpoint. The return type products preview, we have to pass as an argument form data. Now we can access the products and map. We have to map each item to products preview. And for the success state, and we have to pass the products as an argument. Finally, we can do return publishers, merge the loading state as well as the success state and erase to any publisher. With the same manner, we're going to implement search products. First of all, we have to make sure that the API service is not null. If it's not, going to erase to the publisher the resource of type loading as an empty data from the pagination response. Next, we're going to prepare the first value to be emitted under loading. And next, we're going to do the API call. In case if we have an error, we're going to do the same thing, erase to the publisher a new value of type resource pagination response products preview. We're going to prepare, first of all, the form data as we have done earlier. Next, we're going to make the API call, and let's prepare the data to be sent to the publisher. And we can define the success states, and we will return publishers, merge, loading states, as well as the success states, and erase to any publisher. We have forgot actually to add here the repository folder, move the repository implementation and the repository, and create a new folder. Let's call it DI. And here under the DI package, create a new file, the product feature domain module. I'm going to create here a function that's going to be called install private function to inject basically how to provide this instance of the repository protocol, product repository, and we have to access the resolver. This function will return the product repository implementation. We have to pass the service as well as the database manager. We can access the API service by doing resolver and resolve API service and self. Likewise for this database and resolve pocket goods database manager and self. Now for the next dependency is the product use cases, and we have to provide the arguments for the product use cases. We need to register the dependencies by doing app container shared register the dependency in question product repository and self, and for the factory provide product repository argument is the first one, and we are done. Likewise to register basically the use cases. All right, that's pretty much it for this DI module. It's time to run some tests. Inside product feature tests, can delete this. We need to test the implementation as well as the view model. For the implementation, I'm gonna create here the data layer. As usual, I would like to maintain the same structure as my project. Create a new file that's called products repository implementation tests. Testable import, which is product feature. And this depends on the memory database as well as the API service. We're going to override the function setup with error. Let's provide the first dependency, which is the memory database. And we have to provide the API service, provide the repository, and finally the use cases. The first function that I would like to test is getProducts. Should return success with list of product previews. First things first, I'm going to check if the use cases is not null. And because we are dealing with publishers, we have to set the expectation. We are expecting to have products in the first page. And we have to act basically by doing await use cases get products for the first page. And we have to observe the values sync, switch, and resource. In case of loading, we're going to make sure that the response is not null. The response is empty, or the list of products is empty. All right, for the next case, we need to make sure that the response is not null as usual. And we have to make sure that the data from the API call matches the data from the mock data. Assert equal and data should match to products preview. If we are under the success state, we need to fulfill the expectation by doing expectation and fulfill. And we have to add here basically break. And let's add here break. Now, in case if we have an error, I'm going to fail the test by doing xct fail. I'm going to fulfill the expectation. And we have to do here break for the default break. We have to store in cancellables. Now we need to ensure the compatibility with both modern async test APIs for the XCTest 5.8 and plus and the earlier one. And that's pretty much it for the test. Finger crossed, let's run the test. First of all, I'm going to switch to product feature. Click on this button and we have the first test. Let's run the test. And the test succeeded. For the next function, we're going to try to test the function getProduct should return the correct cached product detail. First of all, we're going to check if the use cases is not null. Next, we have to arrange the correct product detail from the mock data. Because we are dealing with publishers, we need to set some expectations. Next, we're going to act. Under the loading state, we need to make sure that the product is null. In case of error state, we need to make sure that we have no errors. Therefore, if we have an error, we're going to fail the test by saying expected success, but we have the error. The same thing that we have done here. Now, in case of success states that we have the same products from the database as the response, we can add an optional assertion. Copy this. Let's come back to the test case. For the ID, it's gonna be from the correct product. Let's remove the keyword async from here and await. Now we have the products with images to products, all right? Now we need to make sure that this particular cached product is not null, and we have to make sure that the product matches the cached product. We're going to meet the expectation by doing fulfill. All right, let's go ahead and run the test. If the test is not available under the list, try to switch back to the project and come back to this. It's going to refresh basically the list. Finger crossed. Let's run the test. And the test succeeded. Basically, we are 100% sure that we are getting the data from the API, caching the data, and the data matches the result from the API call, which is good. We have forgot basically a very important step to wait for the expectation. Let's try and run the test. And the test succeeded, thank God. Let's go ahead and create another test case when we are going to pass non-existent ID for the products. I have arranged a non-existent product under our mock data. I'm going to act, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to add here the default case, break. If we have the success state, therefore we have to fail the test. And we're going to make sure that we have an error by asserting not null and fulfill the expectations. And this is basically our test. I'm going to refresh the list and run the test. And the test succeeded. It means that when we are going to pass a non-existent ID, it's going to give us an error at the end. We need to test that getSuggested should give us the suggested products. At the end, we're going to wait for the expectations and we're going to act. For the first assertion under the loading state, we need to make sure that the products or the list of products is empty. And we are expecting success states and we don't expect actually the error state. Now for the error state, if we have an error, which means that we have to fail the test by doing fail and passing the message and fulfilling the expectation. For the success state, we need to make sure that the suggestions or the list of products or list of the suggested products is not empty. Next, we need to make sure that we have the same products from the suggested products as well as the API call. We need to compare these suggested products to the mock data, and we have implemented the suggested products util function, and we have to pass here the query, and basically we have to access the data and map the result to product preview, and we have to fulfill the expectation and break. That's all we have for this test. Let's run the test. And the test succeeded. Now for the other case, under the same function, we should test that the get suggested products should give us no suggestions when passing random non-existing product title. In case of a loading state, we need to make sure that the suggested products is empty. Error state, we're not expecting any errors, therefore I'm going to fail the test. Now for the success state, we need to make sure that the suggested products is an empty array, and we have to fulfill the expectation and break. That's all for this test. Let's go ahead and run the test. And the test succeeded. We have two functions, I guess. First test case, search products should give us non-empty products matching the search query, and the other one when we have non-existing title. Now we have to act. In case of loading state, we need to make sure that the response is not null, and we need to make sure that the response or the list is empty. And we are not expecting any errors here. Therefore, if we have an error, we're going to fail the test as usual and fulfill the expectations. Now, under the success state, we need to make sure that the list is not empty. And we have to make sure that we have the same products from the response as the mock data. And we have implemented this particular function, search pagination response, under the mock data. That's all for this test. Let's go ahead and run the test. And we have an error. So basically, what is the error? We have the error API error, unsupported payload. Let's come back to the implementation. Maybe we have passed the wrong input or the wrong parameter under the input. Let's make sure we have put the search query under the mock data. Let's look for product. Mock something. Okay, products mock request. We have mismatched the mock request and changed this from search input to search query. Sometimes I do search input. All right, that's basically it. It should work. And the test succeeded. Now for the last test, which is basically under search products, should give us empty products list when passing non-existing products. For the loading state, we're going to make sure that the response is not null and the list of products is empty. In success state, we need to make sure pretty much the list is empty and we have to fulfill the expectation. And we are expecting no errors. Therefore, if we have an error, we're going to fail the test and we have to fulfill the expectation. Let's go ahead and run the test. I'm trying to go back and forth between the two tabs in order to refresh the list. And the test succeeded. And let's run the entire test to make sure there is no interference. Click on this one. And the test succeeded. It's very fast, which means that we have implemented correctly the product repository implementation. And that's gonna wrap up our today's video. For the next video, we're going to implement the presentation layer under the products feature. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next one and happy coding.